There's no arguing that the mainstream media is suffering both in credibility and in ratings. Did one lead to the other? Will competition from alternative sources of news and information be the proverbial nail in the legacy media's coffin? This week, we take a deep dive into the current status and possible future of the mainstream media. We'll also bring you our PoC Top-3 and some news you can't use. So stay tuned for this week's venture into the physics of civics. If you look at our founding fathers, they understood that freedom of the press was crucial for a functioning democracy, and for that matter, for individual liberty. They saw it as a vital tool for holding government accountable and for ensuring that the citizenry was informed, which they considered of prime importance. The British Crown, who they'd been under their control for so long, they were not allowed to print things that were detrimental or derogatory towards either the British Crown or, for that matter, the governor.
So having free reign to print and say whatever was on your mind is key to our freedom.
The Crown did not like to be criticized. So you could be in deep poo-poo if you wrote something about the Crown and eventually about any government official in America. So they suppressed any kind of freedom of speech. One of the turning points was in 1735. There was a trial of a man named John Peter Zenger, and he was a printer out of New York. And he published articles that were critical of the colonial governor, and he was charged with libel just for printing it.
Did he call him fat?
Yes, probably.
Made some comment about his looks.
The jury found him not guilty. And the reason they found him not guilty, because the things he were printing were true. Okay, he was talking about taxes and not being represented and different issues of the day.
Right.
In 1787, signed a constitution. And shortly thereafter is when they decided they need a Bill of Rights.
Right. So you have the Constitution telling us this is what the government must do. This is what the government can do. And now we needed something that says this is what the government cannot do.
And the First Amendment, the Founding Fathers decided they needed to approach this particular topic, the freedom of the press.
Okay.
They knew that you had to have an open and free press that was allowed to say anything, that was allowed to state your opinion.
Right.
And if someone else wanted to counter that, great. So that is the foundation of freedom of the press in the First Amendment. And it wasn't a casual decision. The founders had studied thinkers like John Locke, who argued that government power comes from the people and that people need free access to information in order to govern themselves. The thought was, look, we're a republic and people are going to vote. And if they don't have the facts, they don't know the truth, how can they make an informed decision and vote correctly?
Right. And we see what happens in places where they don't have that. You look at the dictatorships
Communist
that kind of ruled
sure.
in the 20th century and even in the 21st century. The government tells you what they want you to know and nothing more. And if anyone tells you anything that's different from that, well, you're in, deep shit.
We have that now. I mean, China, North Korea, Russia.
They control the dialogue.
They operate under that principle that we will decide what you can and cannot say. No, you can't have internet in this day and age. No, you can't have a free press. You can't have a television station unless we approve it and approve everything you say.
Right.
And that's what the Founding Fathers wanted to avoid.
Yeah. Because without that freedom, all your other freedoms are kind of like moot. This episode of The Physics of Civics is brought to you by Savage Soaps. Cleanse, nourish, and revitalize your skin with luxurious handcrafted soaps for men and women. All made right here in the USA with sustainable, locally sourced ingredients. Shop SavageSoaps.com for soaps, body butter, salt scrubs, and other skin-loving products. Get wet with Savage Soaps.
So they understood that you could have a person who had an opinion, a way of seeing a subject and write about it. And if someone else disagreed, then they could write their disagreement in another article. You would see both sides.
Right.
The idea is to provide enough information that people can do truth seeking. They can figure out in their heart what's true.
What makes sense. Yeah.
And of course, transparency. That was the big thing. I mean, because obviously the countries you named, the situations you named in the press in these closed countries, communist, socialist countries, there's no transparency.
They operate in secrecy.
Yeah. And most importantly, the idea that democracy depends on informed citizenry, that they understand the subjects and they know what's going on, and they can use their own brains to decipher what's true and what's not.
You and I have been around for long enough. We are not spring chickens, as you probably have surmised. And when we were growing up, you had 3 networks.
Right.
And everybody, now you had local channels here and there, but mostly, if you were watching television, you were watching either ABC, NBC, or CBS.
That's right.
You trusted Walter Cronkite and Huntley and Brinkley and the others,
Yeah.
to give you the unvarnished truth. Whether they did or not, I suppose mostly they did, but
yeah,
they all had, their own biases, I'm sure. What's changed?
Well, that's the question, really. What has changed? And when you look at network news or even print media, names that come to mind for me, like you said, Walter Cronkite. What about Tim Russert? Tim Russert was a Democrat. He worked for Democratic administrations and politicians until he became the face of NBC. He did the morning show, Meet the Press. You could watch him and not know where he stood.
Right.
He was tough on both sides. He was an excellent interviewer.
Yeah.
And he was an honest journalist. So the question now is, what happened to the mainstream, we'll call it, media, or the legacy media?
Right.
Which includes, NBC, ABC, CBS, the ones you named.
Right.
Now you've got MSNBC, CNN.
The cable news.
The cable news, you've got
Fox
the New York
News,
Times, the Washington Post, the LA Times. All of these are perceived by most to be left-leaning and liberal.
Right.
And I think, in my opinion, the difference in journalism is we don't have a lot of true journalists anymore. People that will go after a Democrat or a Republican don't care what their politics are. They care whether they're honest and whether they're telling the truth. We don't see that anymore.
Not so much.
We see so-called journalists, and I'm making air quotes with my index and middle fingers on both hands, so-called journalists who are not journalists. They're carrying water for one side or the other.
Yeah, they're propagandists and activists.
They really are. I think people have realized that. The other thing that's changed is obviously competition.
Okay.
You've got social media, you've got, X and all these social media channels. You've got, YouTube streaming
services. Right.
In fairness to the networks who are just dying ratings wise, at least part of it is because of the competition. There are other places for people to go. In a lot of ways, the networks have brought it on themselves.
Well, they're not competing well.
And they become cheerleaders for one side.
Yeah.
And it's so obvious to everyone, even those on the left realize it and say, oh, you know what? Yeah, this makes me feel good because it's telling me what I believe. But what about anything else? What about all these stories that exist in the last several years? And I've got lists of them here, Phil. I mean, if you look at and I'm not trying to pick on them, but MSNBC and CNN specifically have just completely tanked in the ratings.
Really bad.
And if you look at almost literally, we talked about that word last week, all the news stories of the past, 6, 8, 10 years have been a lie. Yeah. And I could give you a quick list here. I went through and
big lies.
You've got the Hunter Biden laptop, Joe Biden being mentally fit, cheap fakes, and the corona lab origins, and the vaccines, and the Biden family corruption, and Russian collusion, and Afghanistan withdrawal was a success. Nick Sandman, the Covington high school kid.
Oh, yeah.
He won a $250 million defamation lawsuit. We'll get into lawsuits later.
Yeah,
there's a lot of them. You've got the Jesse Smollett, the Charlottesville All Good People. The border is secure. There's just on and on. Every major story was either exaggerated or a lie, or maybe even worse.
I had a Russian friend a few years back who was old enough to have lived under the Soviets. And he said you had 2 newspapers. One was the government newspaper named Izvestia,
Mm-hmm.
and the other was the Communist Party newspaper, Pravda. The word Pravda means truth. The word Izvestia means news. And the joke was, there's no truth in the news, and there's no news in the truth. When we think of the powers that be who are coordinating, and you can see the coordination with the Democratic Party, particularly during the Biden years from the White House. They would send up the bat signal, as people would call it, and then every single news broadcast, every single quote-unquote journalist would be reading the exact same lines.
Exactly the same.
Exact same stuff. And it's like
they received a memo from the White House in the morning.
So you've got MSNBC is Pravda and CNN is Izvestia.
You're right. I mean, I think people are not stupid, and they saw that.
Yeah.
And even folks on the left, it just became bored with it because it's just a mouthpiece, And as a result, they're losing so many viewers. And I'll get into that in a second here. There's a couple of things that really triggered the end. And one was when the laptop thing came up.
Right.
After the election, when people realized it was real, they began to think, you know what? I think Jake Tapper and all these people in the media,
Alex Acosta.
They knew that. They knew that was fake. And so even people on the left who like to hear their message, which I get, began to say, well, what's the point of watching this?
Well, I think even worse than the Hunter laptop was when people watched that disastrous debate performance by Biden, and we could see, and it's not that we couldn't see that he had a problem. We could see that they couldn't deny it anymore.
They couldn't deny it anymore. They couldn't cover for him.
They could not cover for him. The veil was lifted, and people are just saying they knew and they lied.
And you say that the part of it's the competition, the Joe Rogans and all the YouTube news type podcasts.
Right.
Once that debate happened, that's when the numbers just disintegrated. They'd been going down for years.
Yeah.
But they disintegrated because people said, hey, screw this. Yeah. We're being hosed here. And I got some numbers here. I pulled up the recent cable news ratings. And so you've got Fox, MSNBC, and CNN. I mean, if you add MSNBC and CNN's numbers for total viewers together,
right, they're
half of what Fox gets.
Wow.
And when you look at the demo, the important numbers, the 25 to 54, the people that buy stuff, the advertisers are looking for, it's even worse. CNN and MSNBC are crushed.
How do they stay afloat?
They're losing money hand over fist. And what's happening now is these networks, they're being spun off by their parent companies because they're such losers. Because they're paying these people $20 million, $15 million, $30 million a year or whatever it is for these.
And they cut loose people like Acosta and Don Lemon and
they're
a whole bunch of other
flies.
They're doing nothing well.
Most of them because people just don't like them. They're obnoxious.
They're kind of.
When you look at the top 15 programs on cable news, you've got CNN, MSNBC, Fox, Newsmax. When you look at those, out of the top 15 shows, okay, 14 of them are on Fox.
Whoa.
The first one that's not Fox is number 15, and that's Rachel Maddow, and her ratings still suck compared to others.
Yeah.
But you can see that people have drifted away.
And she only works once a week.
Right. I mean, I'm not saying Fox is not political too. Obviously, they're
see, that's my next question here, because when you look back at the history of the press, you can go back to like Thomas Paine, who wrote Common Sense in support of the American independence. William Lloyd Garrison published, what was it, the Liberator, advocating abolition of slavery, on and on and on. They were one-sided. They had an agenda. The Hearst newspapers of the early 20th century is another one.
Yeah.
They were not objective. Does a free press necessarily demand an objective press? Do they have to be objective, or do people kind of get that there is non-objectivity here, and how do they take that into stride, do you think?
I mean, everybody knows CNN is left wing and Fox is right wing. Everybody knows that. And that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. They always have been, and that works. The problem is that in the view of many of us, the audience, when we look at CNN, we see that it's beyond just being one side. They lie and they cover up. And I don't think you can say the same about the fellows you mentioned back, in the 17 and early 1800s.
Well,
that was a different situation. They were stating an opinion, but they weren't necessarily making things up. And they weren't like CNN and MSNBC, where they are in bed with the Democratic Party. I mean,
I've heard people talk about, them as basically the propaganda wing of the Democratic Party.
And they are. And you could make the argument Fox is that for the right. And that's fine. I mean, it is what it is. But you have to ask the question, why have the ratings absolutely tanked for CNN and MSNBC as an example, but also for ABC, NBC, and CBS when it comes to their news divisions?
Yeah.
Why have they tanked, and why has Fox and Newsmax grown so much? Is it because we have so many more conservatives? I don't think so.
No.
It's because of the way people look at the news as it's presented by these.
Trust factor.
It's a trust factor.
So I'm curious, Jay, who's number one on the list?
As far as shows?
Yeah.
Without a doubt, and by far, it's the five.
The five.
On Fox. Yeah, they by far are the largest cable news network television program.
So I was expecting you to say Hannity.
He's up there.
He's up there. I can't watch him.
I can't either. He gets on my nerves,
unwatchable. I'm sorry, but every question is a speech.
I know.
Every speech is a laundry list. He talks in lists.
And it's the same
he
shit every
spends
night.
3 times longer to ask the question than he allows for his guests to answer it. And he always incorporates himself. Well, I said this years ago.
Yeah,
I knew before. Shut up. No one cares.
You think he's got a huge ego or what?
God.
I mean, they all do.
No, I'm glad he's there, and I'm glad, I like his guests, but he is just a pompous windbag.
I agree with you, man. But I think people feel they've been lied to, and by the legacy media, and that goes. And here's the thing: it goes beyond television. It goes into essentially. I mean, like something like 92% of all the large newspapers in the country are left wing. I mean, the New York Times, the Washington Post, LA, all of them are left wing.
Yeah.
But here's the difference. In our day, let's say, you had an opinion page, and it was obvious that the Washington Post and the New York Times leaned left, and that was fine.
Right.
But when it came to headlines, it was news. It's not anymore.
You didn't
especially the Washington Post. It is terrible.
It's all one.
It's propaganda. It's made up stuff, or they'll take a story and bend it a certain way to make it more digestible, and it's just fraud. And people recognize that. I think it's come down to where people know what they're watching.
Right. Well, what's next for the independent media at large? And I'm not just saying legacy, but everything. Where do you see this going?
I don't know that it'll ever come back. I think they're done. For different reasons, but I think they're done. And it's because people, they connect better with the independents, because they're just like you and me, man. We're not like political people.
We're not experts in
anything. Yeah. We're just a couple guys with opinions, and that's what people want. They don't want to be lectured to. And when you watch Jim Acosta, when you watch these Wolf Blitzer, and you watch Sean Hannity, you're being lectured to.
Yeah. We're being
And I don't think that's what people want. Listen, there are dozens and maybe as many as hundreds of podcasts on YouTube that have higher ratings than CNN and NBC on an individual show basis. There are lots and lots of podcasts that, and I'm not talking about the big ones like Rogan. I'm talking about medium-sized podcasts that will get 1 million downloads per show, or 900,000 or 600,000. When MSNBC is lucky to pull in, 50,000 in the demo in prime time, they're done. They can't afford the overhead. And
we would love those kinds of numbers, wouldn't we, Jay?
And a podcast like...
Did I mention you should like and share and hit that subscribe button? No, I'm kidding.
These podcasts, Phil, they might have 3 people on the staff. They got somebody answering the phones, and they got producer who's doing the board. And then you look at a show on MSNBC or Fox, hundreds of people, and they're paying the talent, $10, $15 million a year.
Yeah.
How can they survive? They can't.
They can't.
So I think it's gone. I think, and let's talk just a minute about a couple of lawsuits. You've got this one that was just settled yesterday, I believe it was.
With Paramount?
Yeah, the Paramount CBS, where it's absolutely, in my opinion, disgusting what they did. And they defended.
Tell me what happened in that lawsuit. What
happened is literally a couple of days, I think, or a week before the election, CBS 60 Minutes did an interview. Okay, they did an interview with Kamala Harris,
right?
Which was rare. Let's face it, she never went out in public.
She certainly didn't do Rogan.
No. Yeah. So, and what happened is they screwed up. They, of course, they completely edited the interview. They interviewed her for like 45 minutes. They edited it down to like 19 minutes. And what happened is one of the producers wanted to get a teaser clip out online, just on the internet, so people would tune in to 60 Minutes. And he grabbed a clip and sent it out. Well, that clip was the real question and real answer. But what happened is the editors cut it out because she was so bad. Talk about word salad.
Right.
And what they did is they grabbed an answer from somewhere later in the show and plugged it in as her answer because it made her sound not quite stupid. And when this all came to fruition, people realized it. People said, wait a minute, I saw a clip teasing this. That's not what she said.
That wasn't her answer.
Yeah, when that happened, Trump filed a lawsuit. And it was like I want to say $20 billion he's filed for.
Yikes.
And it's been going back and forth in the courts. And really, CBS doesn't have a leg to stand on. They did it. I mean, they obviously wanted her to win the election.
Right.
Their argument was, we edit all, because we have to clean it up and we got to shorten it.
For time constraints.
For time constraints, commercials and so forth. And that's true. That's 100% true. But what they didn't mention was that in almost every case in modern times, when they do this, yes, they show the edited version on their primetime network TV show, but they'll usually release either the full interview online in video form or they'll release a transcript. They did neither. They refused to do either.
Either one. Wow. And this isn't the first of these lawsuits.
Oh, no.
That they've lost.
Trump sued and won against ABC.
Right.
For Stephanopoulos saying he was convicted of rapist, which was a lie.
Not true.
He said it multiple times.
Right.
The inside on that Paramount CBS deal is that Paramount is trying to sell their news division and merge, I guess it is, with, what is it, Sky something?
Sky News?
It's Sky something. And that has to be approved. That merger has to be approved by the FCC. And the FCC is run by the Trump administration. So this has been going back and forth, and it's really an ugly situation. The long and short of it is CBS just settled, and they're saying Trump is getting $16 million up front.
Okay.
And they're saying the total could reach north of $30 million they're going to have to pay. And so and we're seeing these lawsuits all over the place, Phil. I mean, because
they can't afford that.
The problem with the mainstream legacy media is they've gotten away with it for so long, and they bend the rules more every year, a little more and a little more. And finally, people are standing up who have been, defamed and saying, this is bullshit. And then you got that kid. Remember the kid with the Native American shaking a thing in his face? And
yeah.
Right. I mean, he sued and won tons of money. I forget how many. Big money.
What is
from
he,
ABC.
17 and he's a multi-billionaire?
I hate him. Anyway, so that's where it stands.
And all he did was stand there and smile. God, some people get all the luck, man. Why can't some left-wing nut job get in my face?
I know.
I would just love it. I'd just stand there and smile on camera. There's a whole lot more to discuss about this and the whole aspect of censorship and misinformation. We're going to talk about that in depth in another episode because that's kind of the other side of the coin here. Who gets to decide what's real and what's not and that sort of thing. We want to hear your thoughts on all of this. we probably said some outlandish things, tell us we're full of it or tell us you agree. We'd love to hear your comments. And of course, again, help us out, like, share, and hit the subscribe button. Now we come to a very important part of our show, Jay. This is what we call the top 3.
I don't know how important it is.
Today's top 3, well, it's not important at all. None of this is very important, really. It's just, but we like to pretend that we're just like MSNBC and CNN. We pretend that this is important when it really isn't. But today's top 3, what's today's top 3 category, Jay?
The top 3 most overrated musical acts. And this is strictly our opinion. Strictly our opinion.
And if we step on anyone's toes,
too bad.
We don't care.
Yeah.
Okay.
You go first,
you want me to go first?
You go first.
I'm going to say, and when I say overrated, it doesn't mean that I don't like these artists. Some of them I do, some of them not so much. I just don't think they're worth all the hoopla. They're not as great as everyone says they are. And my number 1 is someone that I enjoy, Bruce Springsteen. I like his music. I don't think he's the rock god that people make him out to be. He's got some good songs. And we'll leave it at that. And I've been to one of his shows. It was a great show. But come on. He's not the next anybody. Yeah. And so that's...
I'm with you on that one.
So Bruce Springsteen. Number 2, I would say, is Jay-Z. And for the life of me, now I'm sure I'm going to get a lot of blowback on this, but for the life of me, I'm still trying to figure out what the hell he's good at.
Marrying women, I'll tell you that. That's good.
Well, he's got great taste in women. Yeah. And when you are lucky enough to be working with a talent like Beyonce, a generational talent, which I do see what she's great at. She's fantastic. Great. Jay-Z, I don't get it. He's kind of along for the ride. But please correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. And number 3, I would say, is Kurt Cobain.
Oh yeah, Nirvana.
I like Nirvana. It's good American homegrown punk rock.
Yeah.
Of a certain era. But let's face it, the guy, put it this way, if Eddie Vedder had shot himself instead of Kurt Cobain, he would be the greatest of all time.
Oh, you're going to get some mail on that one.
And
I agree with you.
The guy commits suicide and all of a sudden he's a genius. Doesn't wash with me. I don't hate his music. I don't dislike the grunge movement, as they used to call it, but I just don't think he's worth all the yada yada.
Yeah, I'm with you on all of those, actually. So I had a hard time picking 3. One that goes way back, when we were young, is a group, ABBA. They were so huge, and everybody. I just didn't get it. It was a little too sweet pop for me. So ABBA's.
It is very sugary.
It's just a little too sugary. On the other end of the spectrum, number 2 for me is Metallica.
Ooh, yeah.
I just don't. I'm not going to say I'm a heavy metal guy. I'm not, but I do enjoy a lot of hard rock and good original rock.
I like Metallica. I don't love them, but I like them.
Yeah, I just don't understand all the hoopla. I mean, they're like the shit when it comes to That's my number 2. And along the same lines, maybe again, I'm going way back to the 70s here, but Kiss.
Oh.
I don't get Kiss, man. I mean, to me,
theater.
It's total theater, and that's cool. If that's your thing, that's totally cool. But there are people who swear by their music. I've tried listening to it. Can't relate.
Well, the thing about Kiss is just was in that time the latest iteration of Alice Cooper.
Oh, for sure.
You get a guy of marginal talent, and and Alice would tell you himself he's marginally talented. Have
awesome
a couple
performer.
hit songs, not very good looking guy.
Right.
Puts on makeup and puts on a show, and all of a sudden he's a rock star.
Yeah,
and if you look at those Kiss
point.
guys without their makeup, they're not the best looking.
Yeah, and you got to give them credit. They were kind of the first to come along and do that, weren't they? Like in a band setting?
Kinda? In a band. Well, yeah, I guess Alice Cooper paved the way. And then came Kiss, and then came Twisted Sister.
Right.
Insane Clown Posse, Marilyn Manson, They're just...
I just can't relate to that stuff. I mean, it's just...
It's theater.
It's theater, man. I'm not really into theater. So anyway, that's our top 3.
All right.
God, I'm sure we pissed off a lot of people, but that's fine. It is what it is.
Bad.
Really, you ready for some news you can't use?
Now, most people, I should say, most of these, when they do these kinds of things, they give you news you can use, right? You can't use this.
No, this is totally
worthless.
This
is completely useless. This is news you can't use.
This is a story I ran across that I wasn't familiar with, and possibly because it comes from Australia. This is from a CNN Online article by Jesse Young and Hillary Whiteman.
Okay.
It's called The Mushroom Murder Trial. This woman, Erin Patterson, is standing trial currently for the 2023 deaths of her mother-in-law, her father-in-law, and her sister. They all died in the hospital days after this Erin Patterson woman served them a meal that contained what they call death cap mushrooms. They're like extremely poisonous mushrooms. Oh, and she was also charged with attempted murder of her brother-in-law, who was the only survivor at this little soiree. The trial is actually just wrapping up, and it's gone to the jury, and they're in their second day of deliberation right now. As of we're recording this on July 3rd. So we should have a verdict here shortly. But so the Crown prosecutors allege that Peterson deliberately served lethal mushrooms to kill her lunch guest. Her defense counsel claims the deaths were a tragic accident. Back in 2023, she went out and picked some mushrooms.
Right.
She put them in her dehydrator, and then she used them to make, shouldn't laugh, beef stroganoff. Okay, for her family coming over. Now, there's some suspicious things in the evidence here. One is that she purposely told them she had cancer and she wanted to talk to the family about what her next step should be. And don't bring the children over because I don't want them involved in this conversation. She never had cancer. It was a lie. So she didn't want the kids there because she didn't want to kill the kids. That's the speculation here.
Okay.
She also claims that she didn't have a dehydrator and she didn't pick mushrooms. Well, they saw pictures of her apartment that she put online and there was a dehydrator in the background.
Yeah.
And then they found a dehydrator in a dumpster the day after the alleged crime, and they tested it and there was death mushrooms in the dehydrator. So that's my news you can't use story.
Once again, ladies and gentlemen, that's our show. And we would love to thank you for joining us for this episode of The Physics of Civics. Don't forget to like, share, hit that subscribe button. Anything else you want to add, Jay?
No, that's pretty much it. Wrap it up.
All right. So we're going to go do something more important, and we invite you all to do the same. So thank you very much, and we'll see you here next time for the next episode of The Physics of Civics.